wind battered Virella's cheeks as she was hauled from the battered gates of Briarhole. The once proud archway groaned on its hinges, a last defiant echo from a house brought low, its gardens wild with nettles and the memory of gentler times. Her wrists stung beneath the iron cuffs, spots of blood rubbed raw by the rough hands of men who months ago had knelt to her father in feigned devotion. She didn't look back. The temptation was there, gnawing at her already threadbare heart. But Briarhole no longer belonged to her or to anyone who mourned the old kingdom. Above, the blood moon pulsed through the clouds, grotesquely swollen, staining the world crimson. Ivy shivered in the wind. It was supposed to be an omen of great power and new beginnings, but tonight it cast her exile in a macabre, unflattering light, a parchment signed in blood across the heavens. The guard's boots thrust her forward to the border, where grey stone and moss marked the invisible line between the ruins of her memory and the shadow-thick wilds of the Alpha King. "This is for the last of traitors," spat the captain, a scar coiling down his jaw. She said nothing. Not for them, not after all their mothers had whispered at market stalls. Not after all the pitying glances, the murmurs, the traitor's daughter, witch-blood, curse-bearer, that followed her through every corridor of her unravelling home. One final, rough push set her stumbling across the border. Cold mud splashed her bare feet, painting her hem with the muck of exile. No sword, no companion, not so much as a crust of bread. They'd left her the moon as her witness, and the forest as her judge. The guards lingered just long enough to spit in her direction, then turned back, carving a swath through the nettles that glowed red in the unnatural light. Virella stood alone. Silence hovered, thick as breath caught in a throat. The wild land stretched out before her, black and endless, bristling with ancient pines whose branches knotted overhead like gnarled fingers seaming the sky. With every pulse of the moon, the world felt less her own. Some primordial presence coiled in the darkness just beyond her vision, a waiting, hungry thing, more tangible than mere fear. But Virella refused to cower. She drew a shaky inhalation, scenting moss, loam, and something animal beneath, a living pulse that hummed through the earth itself. She walked a few paces into the wilds, numb feet sinking through sod, each step pulled down by exhaustion that wanted to devour her whole. Shadows swarmed between trunks. The hush was absolute, pierced only by the distant howls that rose in chorus with the night. As she pressed forward, none drew near. Yet she felt the prickle of eyes on her back, careful and measuring, as if the forest itself held its breath. Her chest ached. She scrabbled for remnants of old lessons and lullabies, the things her mother had whispered to her beneath moonlit windows. All beasts are kings in their domain, and all kings are beasts before the moon. The queen had murmured the night before she died. Virella wondered if in another world she would have found the meaning before she bled everything away. Fatigue overtook her before despair did. Her legs gave out beside a fallen ash, the old bark slick with dew. The moon pulsed above, as if watching. Virella trembled, not from fear she had bled that dry, but from the knowledge that nothing of her old life would return. The cold was relentless. It bit into her bones and pressed in from every direction. Still, she did not weep. Not aloud. The first wolf appeared so quietly she would have doubted her senses. From the undergrowth, a pair of molten gold eyes blinked unblinking, fixed upon her, then another and another, ghost shapes drawing closer, their bodies massive and fur-dusted silver in the moonlight. Their silent approach was more frightening than any snarl or charge. Virella's breath locked in her throat as they circled, faintly luminous in the world made red. They did not lunge. They did not threaten. Their presence was a silent jury weighing her, each head tilted with the curiosity and caution of creatures who had witnessed many trespasses, few of whom returned. Vayrella forced herself upright, spine rigid. Somewhere in the pack's shifting, silent dance, a presence glider a leader, unmistakable, his form greater than any other, fur dark as storm clouds streaked with bloodlight. He moved with slow certainty, the crowd parting with a deference so palpable, it sent a chill through Vayrella that almost undid her. He emerged into full moonlight, and even the night seemed to shrink from him. His body balanced the wolf's brutal power and the upright bearing of a man. Muscles ran in cords beneath his ragged clothing, his shoulders hunched with potential violence. His hands were broad and clawed, human and not, and his face belonged to some primal nightmare woven, yet with eyes as human and intelligent as any she had ever known. His gaze caught her and held her pinned. Vayrella's throat tightened. She knew she should kneel or bow or beg for her life, but an old, exhausted pride kept her standing. The wolves spread in an uneasy circle, their hackles raised, twitching noses sampling the air for lies she had not told. He spoke, voice edged with the unfamiliar cadence of teeth and throat, deeper than the wind in the trees. "Why have you crossed into my lands on this night?" The question struck like a blow. For a moment, Vayrella considered defiance, then realized there was no room for it here, no audience, save for the silent pack and the alpha's unblinking eyes. She would not beg, nor would she pretend. What else remained to her but the truth? "I was cast out," she replied, and her voice was steel, wrapped in sorrow. "My house fell. All that's left of it is dust and memory. They called me traitor and left me for your mercy." His gaze held hers, searching. The wolves shifted, low growls rumbling in their chests. Not aggressive, but questioning. Vayrella shifted her weight, steadying herself. Mud squelched beneath her toes. "I do not beg," she said. "I do not ask for your kindness. This is exile, not a plea for sanctuary." The alpha's nostrils flared, tasting the air. "Many beg. When my pack finds them, I am not many," Vayrella answered, voice raw, "and I am tired of masks." His lips curled back, exposing fangs. Not a smile, more an acknowledgement. Some note of comprehension passed between them, something primal and unspeakable. One of the wolves, a pale she-wolf with a scar over her eye, crept forward, drawn by some curiosity or the scent of Vayrella's spent spirit. Vayrella's knees threatened to buckle under the strain, but still she stood. Something in her quiet refusal to retreat, to break, must have registered with the pack. The wolf stopped, cocked her head, and then retreated, melting into the ring. It was deference. The Alpha King's gaze did not waver. "You cross on blood moon, night of the breaking. You know what this means?" His voice was quieter now, the threat taut as string. Vayrella drew a breath that scoured her lungs. "It is the night the world turns. If I must die, I would not die in chains." The pack rustled some disappointment, some grim approval, some murmur of recognition. Not for the first time, Vayrella wondered if the old, story-soft kings who wore wolfskins and queens who spoke with crows had not been metaphors at all, but simple truths the world preferred to ignore. The Alpha motioned with one heavy claw. "Come." Vayrella's legs faltered, but she obeyed. The wolves formed a silent escort, hemming her in without touch, their presence more binding than any iron. The journey was a blur, carried on exhausted feet. Twisting paths over roots and bramble, shadows pressed around like hands searching for wounds. Above, the blood moon fattened, as though it would burst and rain rubies over the forest. Minutes, hours. Vayrella lost count. She stumbled, once, twice, but refused to tumble, the alpha watched her, always his wolfish intensity unreadable, never guiding, never helping. Then the woods spat her out into a clearing slashed with moonlight. Before her rose a fortress of black stone, taller than any castle she'd known, old as the first nightmare. Spires stabbed the sky, windows glowed faintly golden behind bars. The gates stood open, hemmed with iron spikes driven deep into the earth, adorned in strange sigils, some crude, some elegant, all marked with the authority of the Alpha King. The pack spilled ahead, melting into the compound's shadows. 2 sentries watched from above the gate, their faces hidden in the masks of men who were not wholly men. Virella's heart thudded hard and small in her chest, but steady. She entered beneath the great archway, the blood moon painting a final scarlet stripe across the stones, and the gate yawned closed behind her on silent hinges. The air within the walls was heavy with damp and secret. Virella was led through winding corridors, where the scent of wolf and wildflower mingled with old incense, cleansing rituals that could not quite drown out the musk of animal. Servants, men and women with sharp eyes and quick, silent steps watched her passage. Some stared, others muttered behind their hands. She caught fragments. The exile, blood moon born, Alpha's whim. It was never her name, only titles and predictions, spoken as though she were already absent. They deposited her in an outer hall, away from the warmth of fire or the safekeeping of curtains. The corridors here were neglected, draughts bleeding through arrow-slit windows, dust gathered in the corners. Old tapestries hung in tatters, the histories of a people she could not read, their threadbare images faint in the torchlight. She was not guarded, but Virella knew what a cage looked like, even when its walls were stone, and expectation alone, she cradled her wounded hands. The iron had been removed, but sores still circled her wrists, ugly and blooming against pale skin. With nothing else to do, she set to work. She inspected the nearest tapestry, a scene of a wolf crowned in moonlight, torn through in 3 places by careless claws. She rummaged for thread from a basket at the base of the wall, cutting lengths with a dull knife. Her fingers, though clumsy with fatigue, remembered their old skill. She let her mind quiet, piecing together the buried shape in the cloth. The fortress around her went about its business. The halls echoed with sharp laughter and the laconic cadence of command. Courtiers swept past, their finery marked with feathers and teeth, their heads held high in the predatory way of nobility who owed their power to ancient bargains. Some paused to inspect Virella, some sneered at her bent form, her mud-stained dress, and unfashionable hair. She listened to them speak, but she made no sign of recognition or reply. Over time, Virella felt them observe her with mounting irritation. They could not decide, perhaps, if she was fool or martyr, whether she would shatter or survive. But Virella had nothing left to prove, and so she worked in silence, hands moving almost independently from the rest of her. Each knot and stitch was a reminder that the world, for all its violence, could be mended if not made whole again. Still, she was never entirely alone now and then. When the courtier's interest had waned, she would sense a weight in the air, a hush that went deeper than mere silence. Out of the shadowed galleries above, eyes glimmered, too large, too bright for any human. She would look up to find the Beast King himself perched in the gloom, half hidden among velvet and dust, watching her with that same unreadable calculation as in the wild. No word was spoken. Sometimes she felt the cut of his scrutiny like a wind-blown draught down her neck. Sometimes his gaze had the effect of silencing even the most gossipy servants, who scurried past with buckets and rags, and did not pause to stare at her when the Alpha watched. There were rumours born in the flicker of such observations. Virella heard them in the kitchens when she was sent for water, felt them tickle at her as she swept the hearths for her supper's portion of bread and weak soup. The Alpha's beast has found a new interest, the maids would sneer. He only stares at the ones he means to break. Or, to keep, others murmured that the king's half-beast nature grew stronger at the blood moon, and whoever crossed his path in the crimson light would never leave unchanged if they left at all. Her world had narrowed to thread and cloth, to the task beneath her hands and the cold, observing gaze of the Alpha King. Sometimes she felt anger twist beneath her ribs at the memory of her house, at the courtier's scorn, at the injustice that had sung her life to pieces, but mostly she felt tired. Tired enough to let the fortress swallow her whole if it wanted, yet each night, as the blood moon waned minutely, she would look to the galleries and meet Ceolric's gaze, refusing to look away first. It became a ritual between them, silent and fierce, a battle neither was yet ready to name. The air would thicken with something unspoken, the world shrinking to just the two of them, wounded girl and beast king, equally exiled from what they'd once claimed as theirs. Beneath the tapestries, while she stitched the stories of wolves and moonlight back together, Virella wondered what kind of mercy Ceolric possessed, if he remembered being a man, or if the beast had claimed all that was his, or if, perhaps, he stared at her because he saw something that even he, or the blood moon, could not easily destroy. At the moon's apex, when the court was asleep and the wind howled through the broken arrow slits, Virella paused with needle poised. The tapestry flickered gold in the torchlight. She heard the distant, padded footfalls of wolves in the yard, and the faintest echo of a growl from the highest gallery, restless, watchful, something other than anger or hunger. Virella exhaled and pulled another thread through the wound in the cloth. She would not break, not yet. The story, after all, was not finished. Frost had feathered the stone flagstones, tracing delicate webs over the threshold, and Virella's breath plumed soft white in the dawn gloom. All around the keep, the world crouched, silent, and poised between night's grip and the uncertain promise of morning. She wrapped herself in her thin woolen shawl, shivering as she drew back the battered old door to lay out scraps, bread crusts, bones stripped of meat, a nod toward duty, but nothing she truly expected to vanish except the coldness of her own hands. But then she hesitated, blinking in the wan light. Something dark and small huddled against the step, its body pulled tight, ribs heaving, nose dusted with snow. It was a wolf pup, perhaps weeks old. Breath came shallow and choked, paws curled inward as if to shrink smaller still, ears quivering at the slightest sound. Compassion, for Virella, was a muscle-worn roar. She had not intended to feel it anymore. Yet now it ached, deep and insistent, as she knelt and crept closer, hands outstretched. Gentle words threaded through chattering teeth. "Easy, little heart. I mean no harm, nothing at all, nothing left to take from you." The pup's eyes fluttered open, startling amber, shot through with threads of night shadows. It barely flinched. Rather, it simply watched her, shuddering so violently she could see every bone edge beneath its matted fur. There was something wrong about its presence at the gates. Pups were not left unattended, not in these lands, not with the Alpha King's pack reigning over every path. Virella glanced around the yard, a silent expanse. Even the wind seemed to pause before she slipped her hands around the pup's trembling form. It weighed almost nothing, damp and cold and fiercely alive beneath the chill. Its heartbeat beat double time against her palm, and when it whimpered, Virella gathered it closer, wrapping it in the edge of her shawl. She hurried back inside, shutting out the hostile dawn, her mind a litany of guilt and doubt. She hesitated at the empty hearth in the scullery, then tugged a stool close and sat tucking the pup into her lap. It protested weakly, a rasp of hunger and pain, until she dipped her fingers in warm milk and coaxed it to sip drop by patient drop. Its teeth grazed her skin, sharp as needles, but she did not draw back. "There now," she murmured, running a hand along its back, careful not to press too hard against the bruised spots she found. "Even mongrels like you and me," she smiled, the bitter twist of it lost on her new charge. As the puppy drifted into a fitful sleep, Virella's thoughts spun, wary. She did not understand why this creature had been abandoned, or why it did not fear her. With her scent so separate from the Alpha's brood, she wondered if the others would come for it. She wondered if Kaelric himself would notice, or if perhaps he had sent it another test, another piece of the strange game the pack played with outsiders. The day drew on. She sharpened the hearth's dull fire, mended her ragged skirts. Outside, the pack's howls echoed, strange and unsettled. She peered out once, startled by how narrow the courtyard seemed, every wolf tense and circling, as if seeking something they could not name. That evening, when shadows grew long and uncertain, Virella sat by the kitchen's back door, brushing brambles and burrs from the pup's tangled coat, its ears pricked, attention fixed on the yard. She looked up, heart rattling. Kaelric stood in the threshold, silent as an old-growth pine, the great silvered fur at his shoulders catching flame from a torch bracket. His gaze flicked from her to the sleeping pup and back, unreadable as ever. He said nothing, yet something